you so much for the opportunity to come and speak to you all this evening at this conference. As John said, I personally have a great fondness for this church. They have been very good to the church in Frankfurt in terms of the way that John William and Mike have stood alongside Tobias and Peter, the pastors there. But they've gone further than that with me, and this church here has offered me and the ministry I had in Kaiserslautern some very real practical support, and I'm very, very grateful for that and very glad to be amongst you now. So yes, thank you for that. Thank you, I would just say just quickly, thanks to Jim and Sylvia who are hosting me for the second time, which is quite brave of them, but they're doing a wonderful job looking after me and my two little girls. Just a quick introduction to myself. Many people know Paul Sayers, the guy who was in Kaiserslautern, but the reason I'm on the project from Frankfurt is because I have a bit of experience in education, not quite as much as John, but I was 11 years in the state system in England, and then 5 years in the private system in Germany. It didn't do much for my German, I'm afraid, but my experience is fairly broad in that sense. So I've been in the state system, I've been in the private system, I've been in England, I've been in Germany, which does put me in quite a strong position to be able to establish a school in Germany. So I'm not today going to do anything in terms of teaching you what classical Christian education is. We've just heard a very short but decent summary of those things. And I'm not an expert. That's the simple answer. You know, if you want to ask an expert, go to Joe. Memoria Press back there have been serving the classical Christian education for some time. So these are the people to speak to if you want to know more about classical Christian education. I'm not also going to spend much time, if any really, justifying the concept of Christian education either. We've had a bit of that, of course, from Joe. We'll get some from Poyan and from Tobias and John William. All of these will give you very good and thorough reasons why Christians must be interested in education and educate their children. I am here just to talk really about the establishing of a Christian school in Germany. My experience is the experience we've had as a church, but I do want to just sort of not just plough on with some little talk, some little expose of what we're doing without rooting it or bringing our minds back to Scripture and challenging us a little bit as to the importance of this. So in John's Gospel, John chapter 1, verse 11, we'll have been exposed to this over the Christmas time. We are told that Christ came to his own, and his own received him not. And of course we're talking primarily here about the Jewish people rejecting their Messiah. But there is a challenge to all of us, I think, in those words. If we name ourselves Christians, if we name ourselves as those who belong to Christ, do we accept him into every area of our life? Because he is the Lord of every area of our life, including our attitudes to our children and their education. So that's just my little drop in there. You know, Christian education is crucially important, as we've just heard Joe quoting from Doug Wilson. If you are willing to allow your children to be influenced and educated and formed by the world, then you are failing your children as a Christian. It is that simple. You are failing your children as a Christian if you are allowing that to happen. I would like to begin talking about setting up a school in Germany by giving you some context, and this is history. This gentleman here on the right is, it's a representation at least, of Rabanus Maurus, who was the abbot of Fulda Monastery in 822. He's known nowadays, amongst those within education circles in Germany, as the teacher of Germany. That is the high title they gave him, the teacher of Germany. And you can see that Germans like their teachers to be balding and bearded, so I'm well in there. But yeah, so here is the abbot of the Fulda Monastery. It was a centre in Frankish Europe, for education and one of the leading educational establishments in the world. There it is, again, a representation, of course. Had two of the greatest historical German texts there, so the equivalent, if you like, of our English Beowulf or Caedmon's Hymn or the works of Bede. These are the Hildebrandslied and the Merseburg incantations. Were written there, preserved there, still, the pinnacle, if you like, of medieval German literature. And through Rabanus, Germany, or that part of Germany, became a centre of education in Europe, especially in the Frankish part of Europe. But it also led, as Joe's already mentioned, to it proved, if you like, that the monastery was the centre of education at a local level. Fulda was obviously a big prime example, but this was replicated throughout Christian Europe, that the monasteries were leading education. And that was of general pattern until 1158. Another German came along, and his name was, and he's very well known, Frederick Barbarossa. And Frederick Barbarossa instituted a law, a decree called Authentica Habita, which allowed for secular scholars to have all the privileges that religious scholars would have had. And that was particularly relevant in the city of Bologna, because there were people there who were coming in and studying, and there was various laws that if your countryman, if somebody from the same country as you committed a crime, you could be held partially responsible to pay for his misdeeds. And so these travelling students who were coming over to study in this city found themselves basically unfairly targeted. And Frederick Barbarossa said, no, education's really important. We're not going to allow academics to be targeted in that way. And so he made this decree. So there's now protection for academics outside of the monasteries. Oh, hello. Thank you, Emily. That's all right. It's probably me as much as anybody. Oh, there's a picture of Frederick Barbarossa's seal coming up at some point. But yeah, so then a university is developed in Bologna in just after 1158. Salamanca, Oxford, Paris. These all developed universities, secular universities really, at about the same time. Monasteries were more widespread. There he is, Frederick Barbarossa. Monasteries were more widespread, of course. Christianity had spread throughout Europe. And so your common man would most likely find some form of education from the monasteries. But there was this beginning of a higher level academia that was not attached to monasteries. And like I say, thanks to a German, for good, better or worse. Martin Luther, there we go, Martin Luther here, is the man who, from a German point of view, and really from a European point of view, really changed pretty much everything. Martin Luther asked the question that Joe also asked, which was, asked on behalf of the reformers, what is the point of translating the Bible into your own language when people can't even read their own language? What's the point of that? Luther worked hard translating the Greek and the Hebrew into Germany, but was confronted with an illiterate population, so it didn't make any difference unless they learned their own language. So Luther, I'm sort of dropping in the German pronunciation there. Luther decided that education for all was crucial so that they could access the scriptures for themselves. They weren't depending on the Catholic priests or whatever. And so in 1523, he published this guidance in the town of Leisnig in Saxony, but it was something that he encouraged and spread throughout Germany as it was, saying this is how the city, especially the city under the church, should be spending its money. And the first on the list over there is paying your pastor. Paying the pastor. Below, Küsterbesoldung, paying the upkeep of the church. Third thing, the school. And then you've got with the old and poorly, the widows and orphans and so on. But above those things comes the school, just directly after paying the pastor and paying for the upkeep of the church. So that was in 1523. 1 year later, Luther wrote to the officials of all German cities this document here, to the officials, and he said, he was arguing the case that all cities should provide a school for the education of all boys and girls, no matter what background they came from. And with this, you could say the concept, the modern concept of schooling for all, available for all, was born. But in the 1790s, along came the French Revolution, which, while that's in France, not in Germany, we know, obviously, the impact it had here on British society, and it had the same impact on German society, so that in 1803 there was the Reichsdeputationshauptschluss, where the German state began taking away the rights of the church to have property and so on and so forth. So slowly but surely the church was losing financial influence and independence in Germany. And this was the beginning of the end of the church's control over education. Germany at that time also, of course, was an empire. So you had several different states sort of banded loosely together, Saxony, Prussia, and so on. However, has led to the fact that the German system today of education still is state-based. So although there is a degree of federal oversight, education is really in the hands of the local state. So in our case, in Frankfurt, that's the state of Hessen. Now, the current system in Germany actually looks not too dissimilar to what was put forward in the UK in 1944 in the Butler Report, in that it is a tripartite secondary system. So just as the Butler Report said there should be grammar schools, secondary modern schools and technical schools, in Germany we have also a layered system, Gymnasium, which is for higher level academia, Realschule, which is still academic, but perhaps for those who need a little bit more time to get through those things. And then there is the Hochschule, which is still teaching you math, teaching you German, but there is a sort of a direction towards, shall we say, some of the more trade-type jobs and so on. That is still in existence in Germany. So still, when a child leaves primary school in Germany, they will be sent to one of these three schools, depending on their ability, and their teacher normally is the person who has, not final say, but almost final say in that, where they will end up having their secondary education. There has, however, been an increase in popularity in the last 20 years in private schools in Germany. Why is that? So in the last 20 years, there has been a lot of immigration to Germany. It was former Chancellor Angela Merkel opened up the borders, said, come on, come one, come all, and refugees came. It got to the point where there were schools where there was fewer German-speaking pupils coming into a class than there were non-German-speaking pupils. And needless to say, some German parents were like, no, thank you. So, what is the state attitude to Christian schools? The Grundgesetz, the Constitution, says that Christian schools are allowed to exist. They encourage them to exist. They're called denominational schools. There are currently more than 100 in Germany that holds to the Evangelical Alliance's Confession of Faith, serving more than 40,000 pupils. They are still under the supervision of the state, teaching the state curriculum more or less, but they can add whatever they like to it, and they can do it in the way that they like. So long as they teach that 1 + 1 is 2, how they teach 1 + 1 is 2 is within the scope of their own authority, the school's own authority. They're partially financed by the state as well, which is a great help for those who want to set up a school. The only major requirement for these schools is that school fees must not be prohibitive, because the idea is that you are providing a realistic alternative to the state schools. So if you are charging crazy amounts of money, that's not okay. They have to be accessible. A surprising positive requirement is that the whole teaching must align with the school's worldview. So if they have a constitution or a confession that they hold to, the German state requires that they must teach according to that confession, because if they don't, then they're not an alternative school. So this is quite a nice view, if you like, on the way that Germans approach these things. And furthermore, there is no requirement that the school's worldview should be taught as equal to other worldviews. Other worldviews must be taught, but the school is allowed to say, but ours is the way you should be going. This is the better way. That all sounds quite positive, but the fact is it's actually very difficult to set up a private school in Germany. Pastor Tobias was a lawyer for several years, and when he looked at the guidance from the state of Hessen how to set up a school, it was very clear. He said that this is written to dissuade people from doing these sort of things. It's very ambiguous. There's a lot of room for the state to say, well, on this technicality, we're going to deny you. Similarly, there's a lot of opportunity for appealing those things because of the openness, but it is difficult to really know exactly what it is that the state wants from you. We've had positive experiences as we've tried to set up this school. We had enormous positive experience in that we have good financial backing. So although the state is quite generous in supporting a school, it has to survive for 3 years before the state will step in and help. But we have received some very generous financing from Germany and abroad. We also have the personnel. Myself, I'm one of 5 qualified teachers in the church. We've heard of other church schools who have had the complete opposite. They've had a building, which we don't have, but they haven't had the people who can take over and actually teach. They haven't had the money to do it. So we are in a luxurious position with this great exception. We do not have a building. The church does not have its own building. We've been renting from another church in the area for a long time now. They've been very good to us, very generous in their support of us, but we can't use that building for a school. And there is simply nothing really that's coming up. Certainly within Frankfurt itself, it's just impossible. The regulations, what you require to have to be allowed to be a school, 2 fire escapes, corridors that are wide enough for 2 wheelchairs to pass each other, all these sort of things. You just can't walk into a random office block in Frankfurt, of which there are thousands, and expect to find those things. They're just not there. They're not set up to be schools. So finding a building that is suitable to be a school has been our greatest worry. We still haven't solved this, and realistically we need to have our application in within the next month and a half, because it takes 6 months for this to go through. And if we don't have a building, there's just no point sending in an application. This has been a huge challenge. Is this an example of state oppression or whatever? In some ways you could say yes, of course it is, because they are putting these demands down so that they can squash the development of new schools. Are they reasonable requirements? That's debatable as well. You do need to escape a fire. So, yeah. It's been a very mixed time for myself, for the pastors who have been sort of talking me through it and helping me and supporting me through it. And we have been, really coming to the Lord so often, wondering why have we not got a building yet? We've been looking as a church for 10 years. We need one for a school. Our school project cannot go forwards without this building. But like I say, we do have a lot to be thankful for. We have people who are on side. We have a church who more or less are supporting the whole project. They're certainly supporting the concept. Whether they will support by numbers coming in terms of pupils and money is yet to be found out. But that's also, sadly, one of the pressures on us, because if they don't want to send their children to a state school, then they will have to register their child in a private school by March. And a private school will have a contract. And if we don't know, which we won't, that our school is definitely going to be approved, then these parents will have to go elsewhere and sign a contract, which means that we might get the approval and yet find ourselves with children who are actually at another school. It's incredibly difficult. For the pastors especially, it's very, very stressful because they've got to try and keep parents, looking to this vision and looking forwards, while at the same time not acknowledging the practical reality that these children shouldn't be ending up in state education, which is the only other option if they don't sign up for these contracts to private schools. So it's been a difficult, a hard one, but we believe in the work. We believe, of course, that what we are providing for our children, for the children of other churches, for the future, God willing, who knows how many will be coming through our doors from elsewhere. We believe in this project. We believe that we are doing the right thing. We believe everything that Joe has said. We believe everything that you'll hear from the other speakers about our duty to our children and our duty to the church through our children, the church of the future. And so we push on. Yeah, actually, to be honest, that's about it. I was looking at the time and thinking I could have said a bit more, but do pray for us. Thank you again to the church here in Aberdeen especially for your support of us as a church in Frankfurt. This is one of our greatest worries and burdens, and I would beg of you to pray with great earnestness because we are getting right to the point where this could fall apart. Please remember us in your prayers. God is good. God can do all things. We believe he wants us to do right by our children for his glory. So we need to get to work with praying. Thank you.